All right. Well, happy February. I'm so excited to be here with you all. This is going to be an amazing time in our Freight Market Report webinar for this month. We have lots to get through. There's obviously, as always, lots going on in the market, lots going on geopolitically, never a shortage of interesting things to discuss. So I'm excited to be here. We're going to be talking through all the data that we kind of compiled for this month's report, in addition to having some great expert commentary. So Steve, why don't you just kick it off? Tell our viewers kind of who you are, your role at Trax. We'll have Demi, our esteemed guest, do the same, and then we'll kind of get into all of the interesting data.
Sounds good. Well, I will definitely start, and thanks for hosting, Joy. Steve Beda, Executive Vice President of Customer Engagement and Advisor at Trax. So I oversee a lot of our customers in terms of optimizing their programs, both operationally and strategically, as it pertains to not only freight audit and pay, which is a core function of what Trax does, but also in how to best leverage their data asset in terms of the data quality and the data itself that comes out of doing freight audit and pay, which Demi will probably comment on as we go into the sessions today. So excited to be here. I also, obviously, for Trax, look at the market, study the market, and help give commentary and strategy around changing market conditions and how companies can best navigate through the change. So happy to be here today, Joy.
That's awesome. The only constant, right, is change.
That's about it.
All right. And Demi, we are excited. This is your first time joining us with this specific webinar. So we're excited to have you here. Give us a little context about your role at Trax and why you're here today.
Yeah, also happy to be here. My name is Demi Curdy. I have been with Trax for 20 years. Personally worked with Steve, I think, for around 8-ish years. I've done a lot of things in the industry. My entire career has mostly been in the logistics freight audit industry. I lead our product organization. So I am responsible for our Prisma platform, the functionality that goes into it, including our data analytics, our data strategy, and our AI tools. So
amazing. Well, you're the right person to be here, because if the only constant is change, then we would say that the only thing we hear about all day, every day is AI. So hearing about it from someone who knows what they're talking about might be a refreshing change of pace.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm humbled to be here with Demi. She's really a huge asset to Trax. She not only is good about keeping really good ear to the customer and the market and what's happening, but a great leader in terms of the transformation that we're going through to meet our customer demands. So I'm happy to be here. In fact, I read an interesting article recently that it used to be you have to have a really good IQ to navigate through all of the tech changes and marketing, digital buying changes and all this. But now the real measurement of success is turning into how quickly you can adapt to this change. So there's the new intelligence quotient is just how well you can adapt to all this. And you and I, Joy, have talked about this a lot. This is a challenge, right? This is a key challenge for certainly in this market. So, but happy to have you here, Demi.
I mean, what are large enterprise organizations known for, if not their ability to, adapt quickly? And
exactly,
totally joking.
Exactly,
not what they're known for, right? That's what they struggle with. So
you're going to take my end comment today, and that'll be the word agility. But we'll go there later.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited to hear about it. So we're going to kick it off with some data today, as we always do, kind of walking through the freight market report. And I want to make sure we'll end with some details on how to sign up for this. But every single month, Steve does some amazing commentary on essentially a curation of all the major data points in transportation, logistics, supply chain. So if you are not receiving this on a monthly basis, we want to make sure you absolutely get it. So it can be delivered to your inbox. It's extremely comprehensive, full of great data visualization, great expert takes and all of that. So we'll make sure that you've got the link to sign up for that, everybody who's listening today. But I guess we always start with the LMI. It feels like a little bit of a cornerstone for us as the Logistics Managers Index. So
I like the LMI.
What we saw in January. It was an interesting uptick.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful when you look at something in a visual way, and picture's worth 1,000 words. So obviously, you I always talk about blips and trends. you could see where the LMI was decreasing, or at a slope that was not a huge slope, but a definitely continuous drop. And then all of a sudden it jumps.
Yeah.
And in January, right? So just to recap what we're seeing here now, I think February is going to be really important, right? So is it a blip or is it a trend? But if I had to read the tea leaves, so to speak, I would say that that indicator is a result of a competing set of indicators, which this is an index. So this means that this is a KPI that's measured based on multiple inputs. And if those inputs compete against each other, what you see is a resulting number may not be as impactful one way or the other without the competing KPIs. So what I'm really trying to say here is we're seeing a jump here because of the inventory burn off, the more balanced, leaner inventory strategy kicking in, more capacity in warehouses. So that's not offsetting the increases in pricing and transportation capacity constraints that we're seeing in January. The net of result of that is the LMI jumped. And again, we'll see where it goes into February. But that's that balance there. If we wouldn't have had what we've seen on the inventory warehousing side, I think we would have seen this jump earlier. But those now subsided, and now transportation capacity and pricing are sort of monopolizing the LMI value, I think, is what's happening here. Joy.
Okay. We'll get to it in a second, because I think consumer sentiment was an interesting perception versus reality dynamic that occurred in this month's report. And we talked before about inventory and some of the, inventory instincts being related to reactions against tariffs, right? And kind of a lack of certainty around what was going to occur in terms of, pricing. And so warehousing, inventory, all of that was kind of disrupted, right? By even just the perception, right? Regardless of reality, right?
That's right. And let's face it, unless in the U.S. from a U.S. policy perspective, unless the Supreme Court comes in and says you can't use tariffs anymore to create sort of a global trade shift or a geopolitical tool to manipulate decision making at that level, unless that happens, the tariffs are here to stay. The question will be the level for which they are enforced and how much of that is being passed on to the consumer to pay, right? And those are the two factors. And we've been monitoring this for some time. I don't expect to see the sort of market jitter that we saw with the first rollout of tariff, but they are here to stay. And I think that plays into the agility that I mentioned earlier. As it may change, as it changes, having the information available to make a shift or determine how that impacts you and adjust accordingly. So that's for sure. How that impacts consumers, I think, the story is still unfolding a bit. And we'll talk a little bit more about the economics, macroeconomics a bit. We had some really good news, by the way, in February. Mm-hmm. And I'm a glass half full person. So I take good news when I can get it. And I did see some positive signs when you look at some numbers, and I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit.
Yeah, that's great. One of the, relevant dynamics related, obviously, is we've got, hold on one second. Let me pull out that one here. So we've got, related to tariffs, we've talked a little bit about manufacturing, obviously being kind of one of these longer term dynamics around, that's the goal, right? Is that we bring manufacturing back. The goal of creating that pricing pressure in other sectors is that manufacturing comes back into the US, at least from our perspective. But we did see some interesting things that are happening in manufacturing. So yeah, talk us through kind of the ISM PMI rebound, new orders, production increases, all of that kind of occurred. So yeah, give us your
So I've been talking a bit about one of the longer term strategies that all these tariffs are supposed to create, right, is a shift in nearshoring. That would be manufacturing products in the U.S., at least the final assembly in some cases. It doesn't have to be completely created in the U.S. But it has to avoid a tariff, it has to be certainly assembled and somewhat manufactured here. Point being is the long-term strategy of all those things is to bring more manufacturing near shore, right? Bringing manufacturing near shore will also shorten transit cycle times in terms of getting product to consumer, also eliminating some of the cost of transportation of moving the product from overseas. Okay, there's trade-offs though on everything. This rebound somewhat is part of a restocking of inventory that is probably a seasonal type of restocking thing, but I think we're also starting to see possibly some early signs of that manufacturing coming moving more toward U.S. Those are happening in select industries right now, but there seems to be a general trend of companies to invest in more local manufacturing here in the U.S. and avoiding those tariffs in the long term. So I think this will probably take a while to sort of play out in 26 to see if that continues. But we see it in pharma, we're seeing it in automotive, and we're seeing it in integrated circuits and things that are, I would probably call on the list of things that are more critical to U.S.'s ability to sustain through a global event. And that's all coming from learnings from COVID. So, those things those things tend to stick in the head a little bit. And the government enlists forces enforcing policies around this shift. So we'll see. But yeah, these are good signs here coming out of the ISM PMI. And we'll see how it keeps trending as we, walk forward in 26.
Yep, good. Inventory. So we did see a rebound in inventory. You mentioned there could be seasonality, that's affecting those numbers a little bit. And it's important to take context into account when we're looking at numbers, obviously. A little bit of inventory cost surge. But what are we seeing in terms of strategy, in terms of people's, strategic direction or decision making, things like that? I thought this was a good chart that had some relativity over a pretty long period of time.
Yeah, I think if we take out some seasonality, and we also, which I didn't talk about earlier, but certainly the weather did impact us in January here in the States. That did increase capacity constraints. But if that creates also some concerns about how much stock you have on hand for those disruptive events. But if you sort of remove those transient type events that occur, either seasonality or weather, I still see companies using a leaner inventory strategy going forward. And there's a reason for that. There's a cost advantage to use a leaner inventory strategy going forward. There's also risk. And I think the key takeaway here is, we've learned that JIT or just in time is probably too risky in certain areas. But overstocking is also a very expensive endeavor for a company to embrace unless there's a really, really good reason for it, for doing that. And we saw the impacts of that with the tariffs early in 25. So I think the balance is coming. I would be shocked if we didn't see the LMI play this out as well. And that is, and what I mean by balance is a balance between transportation costs and inventory costs. It appears that warehouse capacity is not a problem, but the inventory costs have gone up. And I think that the balanced approach will prevail, which is probably a normal approach for logistics managers in this area and inventory managers that aren't being constrained either way, right? So if I have all my options to me, I'm going to use a balanced strategy here. I do think the continuing challenge with inventory will be for e-commerce, and that's where to place it. So in other words, where my buyer is so diverse that shortening the transit time between the actual delivery last mile and where it's being warehoused is an ongoing challenge, I think, for most sellers and retailers that are all engaged in some sort of e-commerce strategy. Okay.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So we alluded to this a little bit at the beginning, right? Which is a little bit on consumer confidence, consumer sentiment. Obviously, that was something we talked about a lot, like November, right, when we were talking about going into peak season retail and all that. There were quite a few kind of numbers that, now happened in January that I think are probably going to shift in February. I don't know. What are you seeing happen in this space when it comes to a little bit more of the economics?
Well, I do have the advantage of doing the show live today, so I know what the numbers are for February.
I was like,
and so I get to cheat on that.
Yep.
Actually, February looked better. So like I said in the beginning, I do see some really good signs coming. So inflation came in at and I'm going to talk about inflation a little bit in wage. I think it's worth noting this, and especially as it is exemplified in your chart there. So let's talk first about the good news. The good news is, as of February 12 months trailing, inflation came in at 2.4. That is a 0.3 reduction from January 12 months trailing at 2.7. So if that trend continues, if the target's 2%, you can kind of see how close we are to target. Okay, 2% being best case scenario, if you will. That's good news. I don't necessarily think customer sentiment, though, has caught up with that, and I'll tell you why. When you have inflation as high as it was for as long as it had, remember, inflation is a 12-month trailing look back of increase. It's not a 5-year look back of increase. So if most people that are buying that were around 5 years ago buying are understanding that the real increase or cost of increase is quite significant because of the high inflation we saw over several years, and again, in your chart there in the 21, 22, heading into 23 for CPI. So, and it's hard to back those things off. I mean, let's face it, right? Prices may go up less, but they still went up a lot over time. And then the real question is wage increases. If wages increase at the same rate, then everything's good. We have more money to spend on the goods. The problem with wage inflation, though, is it's hard to back off, right? Once you pay somebody more, usually you don't pay them less. So the real key here is balance. Can we create a situation where we're not in an endless cycle of increasing wages, causing more inflation, and then you get into a spin cycle? So the goal here is in 26 is to balance it out, right? And I think it's going to get balanced also by the Fed's interest rate decisions in the future as well. So the prevailing thinking is if inflation's at 2%, we can lower interest rates as long as the job market is healthy. And by the way, that also looked pretty good for February's numbers coming in from January. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about this. I think we watch it, but we did have some good news. And as of right now, inflation is going down and has gone down from January to February. Okay.
Yeah, we live in the future beyond this chart. So
yes,
we have the benefit of a little bit of additional information. All right. Well, I want to loop Demi in because I think that, this is a really important now part of the conversation, which is really kind of the outlook, right? Where are we at? One of the key benefits of the technology that we're all being sold right now, that we're all being told is going to change our lives, is forecasting, better prediction, better modeling, all of that. And as somebody who is on the ground talking to customers in the trenches, right, with supply chain leaders and helping them put these systems into action, just talk me through the kinds of conversations that you're having, the kinds of problems that technology is really solving. Because I think that there's a lot of chaotic language. There's a lot of over-promising. There's a lot of, AI is coming in and disrupting everything, but are we actually better for it? So I'm just interested to know your perspective as somebody who's really in here doing this. And then I know there's some additional things we can talk through.
And maybe I think everybody's at a different level with how they're using AI. I can talk a little bit about how Trax is and where we are and things we've tried. I think there's different use cases, right? There's the AI that we're putting in our platform, the core integration with our platform. How are we using AI? But there's also then how does everybody in the company use AI to make their job more efficient? And that's a little more scattered based on comfort level and tool access and company policy, like what can you do and can't you do? I think all that's evolving, and all of that is is still fuzzy, I think, for most employees and most companies. It's a little bit better in the engineering organization because, you know, the level of expertise is more advanced. So we have we're able to use those tools a little better than the rest of the organization. But we're focusing on a few things, right? So our strategy has been to incorporate AI where we can eliminate repetitive processes, right? Can we use AI to analyze the data coming into us and tell a person the quality of that data, what's going to fail, what needs to be fixed? Can we use that up front? Can we use it to extract the data? Can we use it to normalize the data? But in every step of the process, I think the key learning is that every step of the process, when you build an AI tool, is you have to build in the human component. You can't rely directly on the AI. So, you know, when we extract data, let the AI tell the person what to go look at, but a person still goes and looks. AI decides, hey, I can create this rule, I can do this thing, it'll fix this problem. The AI suggests, the person goes and reviews and actually implements the change. So that's kind of how we're balancing, you know, can we use it to be more efficient, remove those processes, because you absolutely want to. You want people focused on the more value add stuff, right?
So the
Yeah, I think Demi.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Joy.
I do have a really important question because I get this question a lot about AI. Is that the case that the human intervention, human in the loop is necessary because AI is just not there yet? Like, is that a temporary measure and AI is going to get to the point where we don't need that anymore? Like, what do you, yeah.
For some things, yes, I think AI will get to the point where you don't need the human, and, you know, as soon as, and we just don't know where that limit is. I think there are things you never want to trust AI 100% on. There are things that are too important, like, or confidential, and you never want to trust AI on those. But there are things that after you review them for a certain amount of time, if the AI is right, you know, 99, 100% of the time, like there's no need for human intervention. And the way you counteract that, though, is always providing visibility to the AI decision, right? Even if you take the human out, you still have a way to go and track and see what decision was made. So that's also what one of the ways we're addressing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Demi. I look at it as a practical application of AI. And the practical approach is exactly what Demi states, is use AI to do what it does best, and that is analyze patterns, large amounts of data, things like that are very cumbersome for humans to do. And then produce the output that's verified, trust but verify, you heard that before, and then proceed with the right decision going forward and adjust accordingly. So it's a very practical approach. And I agree. I think at Trax here, we've looked at the practical application of elimination of repetitive tasks. And by doing that consistently, we've shortened cycle time from problem to resolution. And we've also assisted in several of our functional areas in terms of cycle time for them to achieve a task. So yeah, I like what Demi is saying because it really is, again, a practical approach at how we apply AI models to different types of problem use cases that we have.
Okay. Where do you think, Demi, that these kind of systems or because the reality is, if let's say a supply chain leader looks across their tech stack, every single piece of that tech stack is being AI augmented, right? Like I can't think of a technology right now that is not being.
That's the goal. That's everybody's goal, right? They want it in everything. Yeah.
Right. So, but let's say you do have to do the due diligence of ensuring accuracy and all these things. So like, where, in your opinion, where do you turn it on? Like, where would you say is the highest impact area to use or leverage artificial intelligence in the supply chain tech stack? Where are you going to get the most value the fastest?
The two areas, and I think Steve mentioned one of them, and that is combing through large sets of data, right? So what can the AI find that a human can't find? And even if a human can find it, can the AI find it in 5 minutes and the human find it in like 5 days?
Yeah.
So I think that the scale of data that we're working with is unique, and leveraging any tool you can to analyze mass amounts of data at one time is really important. The other one is just repetitive tasks, you know, kind of low expertise, repetitive tasks. Like AI can do these things very well. It can also learn from patterns very well, right? So a human does this for amount of time. The AI sees what the human, or the machine, we won't call it, the machine sees what the human has done and is able to replicate that pretty well. So those two things I think are the biggest impact, at least in our operations.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add something, Demi. I think Trax has done a really good job of collecting the data to feed the AI. So, one of the problems here is the data to feed the AI. We capture a lot of information, not only about transportation spend, but about what's going on in the commerce of paying an invoice, for instance. If you think about that, right? The life cycle of all those things that are happening. And as you start analyzing both life cycle data from the carrier point of carrier sending invoicing or LSP to Trax to the pay into AP, and then you also look at the spend dynamic of how you spent the dollar or the money across time. Both are great opportunities to leverage intelligence from that. So, but you got to have the data, and that's key, right, Demi? So
you got to have the data, and you got to be able to clearly explain what that data is. Like that, yes. That's one thing that's like transforming, is that we go from, if you look at EDI where everything's a label and you got to like you got to know what that label is, or go look at a dictionary to know what that label is. And we're moving to a state where every piece of data we get, we're defining for a person, for a machine, what that piece of data is from a business perspective, right? Yeah. So building out those definitions of the data and the use cases is it's all part of the work that has to go into this.
Yeah, it's interesting, Demi. I sat on a call this morning, but we have I would call them a very mature customer that's trying to leverage more of the data asset that Trax has. So our mature customers, Joy, and Demi can confirm this, they're wanting more and more information to put into a data lake so they can put some AI on top of it and analyze that information. And you may ask, well, doesn't that compete sort of with what you do? And the answer is no, because 90% of the work is getting the data captured in the sense, and intelligently, right? Translated and normalized, where you could feed an AI model.
Yeah.
So we can't forget that. A lot of people buy things based on the end product, like a dashboard, right? The dashboard looks really cool, and I'm gonna sort of make a buying decision based on the final product of the dashboard. Well, that's 5% of the work. Right. The real work is getting the data right so that the dashboard produces the right results, right? Renders the right output. Right. And so I think we forget a lot about the work, and Demi knows, because she spends a lot of time in this area, is data analytics, data science, and data capture and data management. It's huge part of what we do. So,
and data matching, I'd add to that too.
Data matching, exactly. So we all have to remember that this precedes any sort of practical use of AI, is having the data to accurately do those things. And so a lot of time has been spent up front collecting that massive amount of information. There's probably, Demi, fair to say, we haven't fully exploited all of it yet. Probably more to come, right? So
we have a lot of data. We have more data than you think about in the freight audit process. We have, the contract data, the rate data, the invoice data, the customers data, the shipping. I mean, there's a lot of data, and it's in a lot of different formats, a lot of different use cases, and collecting it all and being able to normalize it all, put it all in a similar structure, make it understandable to tools like AI. They can understand what that data is and how it relates to other data sets. There's a lot of work done and a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And I think you're competing against, I mean, I feel like we need to issue like a global expectation setting, because you're competing against, I want it now, right? So AI is being sold as the shiny end product, right? Like it's being sold as the dashboard or the efficiency or the headcount adjustment, or like all the outcomes is what is being sold. But we're talking labor intensive, upfront work before any of those outcomes are even possible.
That's right.
Which you can see a real then conflict when it comes to decision makers, because you've got CEOs who are reporting to boards who are, bottom line driven, and then you've got CTOs who are going, but wait.
And that's the key, right? The importance of the data, like the data that is in that Trax has is key to business decisions. Like your executives are making decisions based on the data we're providing. And so, yes, you can spit the data into a tool and it can give you an answer, but ensuring that you're getting the right answer that's the extra level that we have to take.
Yeah. That's well put, Demi. I always said, if you ask me what I spent in transportation dollar last year, even running a report on something like that is fairly easy, right? Now, it depends on, there's about 15 other questions you need to ask when you ask that question, like you based on ship date or but think about a real complicated question like, why did my cost per shipment go up? Or why did my cost per unit weight go up? There's no AI yet that's going to answer that question accurately, not to any detail. So people expect this answer just to come out, and it doesn't work that way. It's not a reality yet. So it's interesting. I saw some transportation news the other day where a bunch of transportation stocks took a hit in the market because some AI automation threat came out or whatever, and spooked all the investors in these transportation companies. And these are companies that we call carriers, LSPs, right? Your big providers of logistic services. But it was all just a misinterpretation of the news. So again, we fall into the trap of hearing something, making a bunch of assumptions, and they're probably wrong. So this is the world we live in today. So the message to, I think, the viewers is be really careful what you read and take a deeper dive in understanding what this is all about, because you can easily get misled by just taking a surface level look at some of these things. What you hear and read, I would question it and try to get a better, deeper understanding. And Demi mentioned it. It's a really good point. Even within Trax, we have different people at different levels of understanding of what AI is, right, in their own lives, and how we use different AI-assisted tools. And so you can imagine in the business market, it's even more mystified, I call it, in terms of the reality, marketing versus reality. But I think we can all safely say one thing, and that is that the time between getting the information I need, right, and that's usually pretty quick, right? The time, if we can lessen the cycle time between an event occurring and the data to support it, that's goodness for everyone, because that creates the ability for our customers and shippers in general to be agile in an ever-changing market, which is a theme that we've been talking about for months. So the more data I have, the more enablement I provide. And Demi knows this, the data asset is everything in terms of what we do. And that's a really powerful way to navigate what appears to me to be a consistently ever-changing market where a disruption could really throw a curveball in the supply chain. And it has, right? Whether it's tariff, COVID, geopolitical, whatever. So last time I checked, we have a lot of aircraft carriers over in the Middle East right now. Who knows, right? We hope nothing happens, but it's the world we live in. So, yep.
Well, let's end with that. I want to get practical for a second. I think both of you can have some insight into this. If we were to say, okay, supply chain leaders, the goal is agility, right? The goal is to reduce the amount of time between getting the right, an event occurring, getting the right information, and then acting on it, right? Ultimately, in the correct way. What are the traits of a system that can support that kind of agility? Like if I was a supply chain leader going, say, how do I diagnose whether or not I'm poised for that kind of, reaction sequence or, timing and all of that? What am I
Yeah,
looking for?
Demi, you might talk a little bit about how we've improved our ability to onboard a new LSP into the network, into our connectivity for information, and how we use tools to do that, maybe a little bit. And maybe I could talk a little bit about on the decision-making side.
Yeah, I can talk about it. I was going more to, the speed at which your data yields valuable results, right? So
You can do that. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
but it kind of relates, right? Like it depends on if that's an existing feed in the system or if that's a new feed in the system. It could be either one, right? And I think Steve alluded to it already too, but being able to make decisions on an invoice in the system and getting it to a state that is usable, that the data is usable, becomes quicker using the technology, right? So you may not ever get to where an AI can 100% action an invoice, but can you get it to where it can, or an exception or whatever, but can you get it to where it can clear 75-80% of those and you're only left with the 25% bag, right? So you get the data through the system quicker. To get the data in the system quicker, like to Steve's point, that we have been working on tools and they are AI powered tools to take massive amount of feeds. I think if I talk about our old process was like, hey, here's our data requirements. Here's here's the what we expect from you. Can you send us something that looks like what we expect? The shift is that why don't you just give us like 1,000 files that you already have, and let's use AI to analyze them and tell you exactly what you need to change, right? It's from giving somebody the overall requirement and letting them build from scratch to saying, hey, I actually only need you to tweak these 2 things and then you're ready to go. That gets the data in the system super quick, and we've seen like 3x improvement in time to onboard, and we're looking to even get 10x within the next few months. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great use case, Jimmy. And Joy, I'll cover it from the other side. So almost all of our large customers, and I talk about this in the webinars, are on some sort of digital modernization roadmap to some extent, right? The ones that are less mature are working on things that probably in a scale of 1 to 10, if they're at a 3-level maturity, they're working on things that are maybe, I would consider maybe some things that should have been done a few years ago. But we also have customers on the 9 and 10 scale that are leveraging the most advanced usage of data that they can get, and they want it every day. Okay, they want that information every day in their own data lakes. And the companies also on that scale that are 9 to 10 have invested in their own data product teams and data science teams, meaning those teams are the teams that understand how to integrate those data components, whether it's AI assisted or not, into their operations. So the real maturity of this whole thing, and what Demi talked about, is the ability for Trax to get the information faster. And then a company's maturity is going to rely on the ability for them to operationalize the data into their management level, where decisions are actually being made based on the information that they have. And the information is reliable enough to make said decision without the risk of making a wrong decision. So I think there's 2 sides of it. And we're seeing an acceleration both from a Trax supported methodology of getting it faster and getting the job done, but also promoting our data asset into companies certainly that are more mature, and accelerating their ability to leverage that data faster, more frequently, and really into their decision support process.
Amazing. That sounds revolutionary.
That's all I'm going to say on it, Joy.
That's awesome. All right. All right. Well, fantastic. I think we covered a lot of ground today. Obviously, a lot of the data from this month's report, and then a lot of obviously additional commentary on what's now and what's next. So any final thoughts or anything we didn't cover, Steve, that you wanted to give any final thoughts to? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap up, tell everyone how to subscribe, and end our
No, just maybe one last point, and that is just a bit of caution on reading any of the tea leaves, and that is always look at the trends versus the data point individually. That's why I always say it'd be interesting to see what February looks like on the LMI when we see a jump that we saw in January. So I think February will tell us whether that jump comes back down and the slope continues one way, or we continue with the jump in an increasing curve in a way that we haven't been seeing in the past. So trends are important. Data points are important, but trends are also important. So I think February would be really interesting when we talk about February to see, has inflation remained low? Does the jobless rate remain low? Does the CPI recover? We think the Fed's going to maintain interest rates. And do we see the LMI become more balanced going forward, which is what my prediction is. But we'll see. And I think the trends really make a compelling case for what the future looks like.
That's great.
That's it, Joy.
Awesome. Well, you can go see by looking for yourself on a whole bunch of sources, or you can just subscribe to our freight market report and we will do all the work for you. So that is definitely what we suggest you do. I'll put the link in the comments, make sure that you have access to it. You're welcome to sign up there. You'll get all of our curated resources every single month that include the LMI, all kinds of transportation and logistics data, supply chain data, everything that you'll need to know to make strategic decisions for your organization. And it all comes with Steve Beda's fantastic insights and expert commentary. So amazing time today, guys. I think this was a fantastic use of the afternoon. We're going to wrap up now, but we look forward to seeing you again next month, Steve. And we thank you so much, Demi, for joining us today. What a nice
Thank you, Demi.
Thank you, guys.
A pleasure.
Have a good rest of your afternoon. We'll talk
Thanks,
soon.
Joy.
Thanks.